Can you, for people who haven't seen JFK Revisited, just give some of the highlights of the ARRB evidence that was, as you pointed out, kind of shockingly, but also predictably ignored by the media?
One of the things that is so important is that they discovered the House Select Committee on Assassinations printed a deception in their volumes. In volume 7, page 37, you'll see a quote that says, unlike the witnesses at Parkland, none of the witnesses at Bethesda saw this blown out back of the skull on JFK. All right. Well, when the review board declassified all the House Select Committee documents, that was false. All right. Just as many people saw this blown out back of the skull at Bethesda as saw it at Parkland. 42 witnesses, 42 eyewitnesses saw this. Now, I probably don't have to tell your audience that is strongly suggestive of a front wound, because it's exit wounds that leave these big blasted out holes, in the back of his skull. All right. Another thing that Oliver brought out with Doug Horne, and I think this is very explosive. When Horne and Jeremy Gunn interviewed John Stringer, who was the official autopsy photographer, they brought out the pictures of Kennedy's head, okay, which Stringer was supposed to have taken. And so Stringer walks up to the easel. He puts his face like right up to the pictures, and he says, "This is Ansco. I didn't use Ansco. I used Kodak Etrichrome." And he says, "You see these numbers here at the bottom? This is a press pack. Okay, I didn't use a press pack. These numbers denote a series. I took separate dual folders." And so at the end of the interview, Jeremy Gunn asked him, "Are you ready to deny you took these photos?" And he says, if that's a press pack and if that's Ansco, I didn't take these pictures. And so then Oliver very adroitly had Whoopi Goldberg then say in the film, well, if he didn't take them, then who did take them? And we segued to the whole series on Knudsen. Okay, Robert Knudsen, whose family said he took. So the question becomes, why? You would think something, not really, between me, you, and Oliver, you would think something like that would make a blip in the press. It didn't. It didn't at all.
It suggests, just to sum it up, that there's false pictures of Kennedy's body out there. That's what the public was shown. So that doesn't look like it was a massive head wound in the back of the head, which was shot from the front. So they buried that. They not only buried it, they distorted that evidence. That's a very important point. There's also the fingerprint story.
Oh, my God. Well, that night, the rifle was shipped to FBI headquarters in Washington. And as Brian says in the film, Sebastian Latona, the #1 print expert at the FBI, is told to get prints off the rifle. He does everything. He dusts the rifle. He brings in the photographer. The photographer brings in lights to light it, to light the thing up. They're hours trying to get prints off this rifle. And at the end of I can't get any prints of value off of this rifle. All right. Now, Bob Tannenbaum told me, Jim, do you know how good Sebastian Latona was? Every DA in the country wanted Sebastian Latona at their trial because he had written the pamphlet that every department in the country followed. Okay. If he couldn't get prints off, then miraculously, a few days later, the Dallas police do get prints off it.
Good timing.
It's fascinating. The prints are very vague, right?
Yeah, he couldn't get prints of value off it.
In my movie, I suggested fictionally that someone went to the funeral home and took Oswald's hand and put it on the rifle. It's the one explanation for how these vague prints got there. There was also, by the way, Oswald took a nitrate test on that same day, and he didn't have any nitrate clues on his cheek. Nothing.
Yeah, that's true too. Yes.
I mean, all
No
these
nitrates on his cheek.
This is basic Sherlock Holmes shit, and they miss it. That's why it's so annoying to me that they say, What's the new thing you got?" Well, what's wrong with the old shit?
Right.
That no one ever proved it, and no one ever did the basic detective work that was required. Because why? Because there was such a mess bureaucratically. It's clear that Lyndon Johnson didn't want to go into an investigation for real because he feared it. He feared what would come out. And he feared that there'd be a war. That's what he said to the Warren Commission.
Right.
I'm just saying, why? America is very smart. We have crime shows all over the airwaves, everything, where we love crimes. But we don't even pay any attention to the most basic. The president of the United States, a pauper, and would get more attention for a murder than our own president. It's shocking to me.
You do this film, the 1991 film with Kevin Costner. It has a major impact, right? It has a legislative impact. It leads to the creation of the ARRB. You then, because the media ignores the findings of the ARRB, you make this great documentary, JFK Revisited, Through the Looking Glass. And now, fast forward to today, you have Donald Trump releasing around 80,000 pages of JFK files. So my next question is, what has been released so far by Trump and what hasn't been released that we know of?
There are some interesting things. I mean, nobody can read 77,000 pages, in a brief period of time. But for instance, what we found out is, see, the Kennedy assassination really bothered Castro. Okay. And on the night of the assassination, he made a speech, okay, saying, you watch, they're going to try and blame this thing on us. All right. And then 4 or 5 days later, he made another speech saying, look, I know about rifles. Why would this guy use a manual bolt action rifle if he was going to be doing this thing? All right. Well, guess what? In 1969, it bothered Castro so much, he ordered a reenactment of the Kennedy assassination. And he said, I want my 3 best sharpshooters to try and do what Oswald did. Okay. And guess what? None of them could do it. And in fact, this is one of the most telling things about this whole case, is that nobody's ever been able to duplicate what Oswald did. The only way CBS did it is that they cheated for their 1967 special. All right. They enlarged a target twice the size of what Kennedy's head would do. And then they covered it up.
The big thing about this latest information is that it's the degree of involvement of Oswald with the intelligence community. That's the massive evidence of some kind of collusion. How does this guy, who apparently has no background and is a bum and is a lone nut, how does a lone nut happen to know all these people who he's seen with in New Orleans and in Dallas and in maybe Mexico City? He's seen with agents. Why does Angleton have his name on file from 59 on? It indicates what Richard Schweiker called the fingerprints of intelligence are all over Oswald. And we have never faced up to that because why? Because the CIA is sacred in American political history or something. They're not sacred. They're a bunch of criminals. This is what we're trying to say. And we've been saying it from the beginning. I got scorched by this, for criticizing them as thugs, as basically mafia. And we know that they cooperated with the mafia. That's not to say all the people in the CIA were bad. No, these are key people in very important leadership posts. They include Richard Helms, includes, I think, Alan Dulles, although he stays clean as much as he can of the whole thing, but he's in charge and he's fired by Kennedy and he's around the case for all these months. He stays in Washington. He goes to every meeting of the Warren Commission. He monitors the Warren Commission, makes sure that they know nothing about Cuba, the Cuba operation, which he knows a lot about. He doesn't open his mouth. He doesn't say that we're trying to kill Castro all this time and we're financing these anti-Castro groups in Miami. We have a gigantic station called
JM Wave.
JM Wave with how many people there? 800?
There's hundreds of agents at JM Wave. Yeah. It's almost 1,000. Okay.
In other words, it's bad. It's bad intent. It's bad faith.
And I watched an interview that you did years and years ago, and you compared, of course, having Dulles on the Warren Commission to like asking the fox to investigate the hen
house. He actually said that in front of Congress. Okay.
I know.